Welcome
Welcome,
to Half Brain.
Half Heart. Interracial relationships that also have birthed kids, children, and it's almost like race doesn't exist in the house.
Yes, I
And
actually,
that fascinates me.
one of my patients who is biracial, and we've had this conversation because that became part of her therapy. She's like, why didn't my parents ever talk about this? Uh, and felt so lost in the world, felt like she wasn't quite accepted in either camp. She's like,
Mhm,
she has no other choice but to call herself a Black woman,
mhm,
but she doesn't look Black enough that she
mhm.
really feels accepted by, Black students. This came up a lot when she was in college. By the Black students, she is not white enough to be accepted by the white world, and just felt out of step with, like,
Yeah,
couldn't find her community,
yeah.
and so lost and so angry with her parents for not talking about it and not thinking about it and not doing something about it for her.
And I remember my mom asking me one time when I was young. I was like, I think I might have mentioned this to you or someone recently, when I was probably like early teens, maybe even preteens, and asked me something. I don't know how we got on the conversation about it, but I must have said something like, she either asked me, would I marry, someone who wasn't Black? And at the time, and I still kind of feel this way, I said, why would I do that? I said, why would I welcome that strife and that challenge? Like, relationships are tough enough. Living in this world is tough enough. Why would I almost intentionally seek out more challenges, right? Not because I'm like, oh my God, no, but it was just more of like, there's so much work on top of just being with someone
Yes. Yeah.
that needs to happen. And I still like, and not so much of like, why would I, or why, whatever, or I wouldn't, but now I still have that thinking of, it's a different level of work, or it's an added consideration, and that's why I say it's so interesting, because I think a lot of people, and I've seen it in my own family, where they have biracial children, and and it's just like, it's not a conversation. It's not a They're not even intentionally like bringing in one culture or the other. I mean, it's almost like, I'll say, so my brother is deaf, and was born mm, deaf since a child, like very, very young, like a baby. And I always grew up, one, I never saw, like, we never really talked about it as a disability. My
Hmm.
brother was just deaf.
Hmm.
That's just what it was. And so as I got older and was exposed to more people who were hard of hearing or deaf, you start to see how differently, they've approached it in their lives, and how their parents have approached it. And I've met children or parents that have said, I don't know, I won't let my child sign. They have a implant or a cochlear implant,
Hopefully, in the
and
whole.
yes, their speech is different, but they've never learned to sign.
Hmm.
I've had, my brother's dated women who said, oh my gosh, it's so amazing that your family signs. My family never, nobody in my family learned. So they might sign, but and I just kept thinking, I'm like, why wouldn't you talk about it? Why wouldn't you, like, why is it this taboo subject that, like, it's just like, we're going to act like this doesn't exist, but it impacts that person's
Really,
life. You don't
exactly.
have to talk about it as a disability if that's not the way that you view it, or if that's not the way, whatever. But like, it's like having the elephant in the room and not acknowledging that the elephant is in the room.
Yep.
And so it's so interesting and fascinating. And I think in some situations, people make a conscious choice not to do it. And then other times, people are in this world of like, oh, love is love. It doesn't matter. And I'm like, no, love is love. It should prevail. However, in order for it to really be strong and prevail, you have to have that conversation. You have to acknowledge it. How does it not come up? How does
Right.
it
That's pretty.
not come up?
Yes, and I'd say from what I know of this particular family is it didn't come up because there was so much other trauma that was taking up
Mhm.
space, that it just got so low on the totem pole that
Yeah.
survival and trauma were just so big
Yeah.
that there was just not as much space for it.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So yeah, I would love to talk about, and then the last thing I had was just Hollywood. Like, let's talk
Yeah.
about that. Let's talk about like the image of, when you were talking, we were talking
Oh,
about the movies and talking about
yes.
12 Years a Slave, and we're talking about Roots and the reboots and the movies and like the stories that are being told about the Black experience in the US.
Mhm.
Um,
Tells them who has the
Oftentimes it's
power.
not us. And
Well,
even
see,
when it
that's the
is us,
thing.
we have to do it through the lens of what's going to appeal to the majority.
Exactly, which is again the thing in terms of just the differences between cultures.
Yeah.
Because Jewish culture, they tell their stories and they tell their stories authentically from their perspective,
Yep.
unapologetically and regularly. And
Yes.
it's do not always
And
remember
for
that.
themselves.
Yes.
I mean, it is to educate and inform, but it's also like, no, 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 we're going to have a sit down and talk about this, and my
Exactly.
kids are going to understand this.
Exactly. And that is something that I think is a great example that it would be that we can embrace, but it's so difficult to embrace because of the economic, like we just have so many challenges. But when we have embraced it, it can be, it has been so powerful. And which
Hmm.
is one of the reasons why I was like, okay, if this movie is not going to be extra traumatizing like so many have,
Yeah.
then I need to support it because I have avoided so many of the other ones that I've wanted to support in spirit because I'm
Yeah.
so proud that these
Hmm.
stories are being told, but knew that being protective of my psyche is really important, that I just probably couldn't deal with it.
Hmm.
So this one I was like, okay, I think I can handle, and I I could, and it was just beautifully done.
It was masterfully done. I think I was telling a friend of mine who's a white gentleman, and we've had some of these conversations, but he's also, I think, a little resistant to getting it. It's almost like, like kind of like how, probably our grandparents, like, why we got to talk about this? Or like, why, like, can't
Yeah.
we just, it's fine. But I said, I would really love for you to watch this movie because I think it does it's not a race movie, right? It's not in the sense of the way
Mhm.
that we usually hear things where it's like
Yes.
the antagonist and the like, whatever. It's more of just like this search for knowledge and this like evolution and this kind of like, oh, it
Equanimity.
could be this, and oh, it could be that, and oh, if I researched this and if I looked at it from that. So I was like, it's not, you don't walk away think, because he was like, it feels like a really heavy movie, and I'm like, it
Well,
is, but you
but
walk away
yeah,
kind of being like, huh, and not feeling like there's no hope.
yes,
It's you don't, you're just like, oh, I have a bit different understanding. And it's just a thought provoking. And I'm in a space where like
yeah,
there are times when I want to see the like goofy, don't want to think. I've done enough thinking for the week. But if I'm going to do a movie like this, I want to walk away and be like, huh,
yeah,
I want to have a conversation with somebody about this. I want to like help continue to evolve or think about this, and not just being like, here we go again, like, another whatever, whatever. But the other thing I think I would love to talk about is, have you heard of the movie? I'm not gonna get it right. It's like Flowers of the Moon or something like that. It's
mm,
interestingly enough, I think everything happens for a reason. So I listened to the podcast, obviously, and there's a podcast, it was about the Osage murders.
mm,
And so there's Osage territory out west,
mhm,
and where this tribe, the Osage Indians, were very, very like so astute and so brilliant that when the white, what do you call them, settlers, yeah, I guess, whatever, the people, yeah, the people were coming in, like bring,
mhm,
exploring and all of that stuff in the west, were coming in and kind of taking up land and all this stuff, and laying claim to some of the land. They somehow were able to, organize and basically get to this point where they are entitled to the land. They had head right laws that basically said that all of the property continued to go through, what you were saying, that wasn't available to Black people, went through to all of the descendants. And then there was something around like, even if you married even if it was like an interracial marriage, the property still remained to the Osage Indian, or like it. So it's very, very like clearly defined that like you had to be Osage to own this land.
Mhm.
Well, finding loopholes, these men came in and would marry Osage women
Mhm.
and then basically like kill off everybody in the family. So they would kill off the wife, they'd kill off the children, and even if it was their own children, they would kill off the children and basically like be like, "Oh, there's no one left in the family. It's now my land." And so I had heard a podcast, listened to a podcast about this, like, I don't know, like maybe like late last year or something like that. And then interestingly enough, there's now this movie. I think it's on Hulu now. I keep saying I'm gonna watch it, but now it's this movie that's talking about it. Um, and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm gonna watch it. But and I think
DiCaprio.
Leonardo DiCaprio is in it. But it's about this whole story, and it's documented. And there's like there were a couple of men that I think were really like overt about what they were doing, and so they eventually did something with them. Like but they got like 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And then of course we're able to maintain the property.
Oh, yes.
Um, and interestingly enough, and I'm pretty comfortable saying this, repeating this because there were some I like went down this rabbit hole, and I think it's been researched by some quality sources. The woman, the pioneer woman, I don't know if you watch like Food Network or anything like that, but she's has a cooking show. I think she has her own like line of pots. Her name's like Ree Drummond. Beautiful woman, white woman, red hair. They say her family is somehow linked, and I think even her husband's family is linked to some of the men that were doing that dirt back then, and they have huge amount of land in Osage territory, and they were like, and they think it's because of that. And so like that, and so it goes back to this whole like, now we have this movie, we're having these conversations, and then we close the book and we go on like, so what happens, right? Like, and I'm not necessarily saying that she's got to pay for her ancestors, but like something's got to happen. There needs to be something more than just a movie, which is written by white men. White men are acting in it. Like it's almost like all of those proceeds should go to Osage Indians. Like
Exactly.
how are you allowed to capitalize and profit from your crimes and the crimes of others without some type of retribution? Anyway, sorry. You know what I think the other thing that we might need to do? Maybe we do the housekeeping and all of the other stuff in the beginning, and then we go into the podcast. Because, ma'am,
I don't
we
know if that'll even work because we just started out with, so
hi,
how you doing? Right. How you doing? How was your week? How was
what'd
your
you do?
birthday? And then an hour and a half. Literally, we started at like 11:02,
Like, yeah.
and it's 12:29. And except for you giving the list of other topics that we could talk about, all of this is eligible for podcast.
Well, you
So
know what